People are calling me a CIA agent because I critique Pan-Africanism as a form of white supremacy. The funniest part of this is a lot of the loudest voices that are doing it are not even foundational black Americans. They are talking to me from across the ocean or from a completely different historical trajectory, and somehow I'm the one accused of selling out the lineage that literally bled into this soil. My ancestors actually went through chattel slavery here, Jim Crow here, redlining here. They fought in every single American war, and they built and bled for this country at every stage of its development. My family line is etched into the legal structure of this land. So when some random person with no stake in that history throws CIA agent at me because I'm not bowing to their Pan-African script, the irony borders on absurd. And notice what never happens in those comments. The argument does not get touched. No one is breaking down the logic. No one is showing where the premise fails, where the conclusion does not follow. All I'm getting is ad hominem, name calling, deflection, projection, anything to avoid engaging in what I actually said. So let me restate the core of it in clean philosophical terms. I set up a dilemma, two horns, no way off. Horn one. White supremacy is evil. It is unjust. It is wrong to build a social order that treats whiteness as the standard of human worth and everyone else as derivative or inferior. On that point, I agree. Horn two, the way a lot of Pan-Africanist rhetoric claims to fight white supremacy is building an entire identity around being in opposition to whiteness. The center of gravity doesn't shift. The white man stays the metaphysical reference point. You are not dismantling white supremacy at that point. Instead, you are preserving it as the organizing axis of your worldview. If your entire self-conception is the people who have been oppressed by white people, you still are orbiting a white sun. You're still organizing your history, your future, your politics, your solidarity around what white people did and do. You did not escape that structure. You just tried to invert it. That is the dilemma. You either one, admit that a worldview structured around race with whiteness as the primary reference point is toxic and should be transcended, or two, you cling to an identity that only makes sense in opposition to whiteness, and in doing so, you keep white supremacy spiritually alive while claiming to fight it. Every time someone responds with, "You aren't letting us defend ourselves," or "the white man has done this and the white man has done that," all they do is reinforce my point. They reaffirm the hierarchy they say they want to escape. They insist on a reality in which the white man remains ontologically prior, the prime mover of black life, the central subject around which the black world must react. That is white supremacist metaphysics dressed up in revolutionary branding, okay? Now, throw Pan-Africanism into this. Pan-Africanism talks like it's liberating, like it's about unity, like it's about a worldwide black community. But metaphysically, it flattens blackness. It pretends that Africans on the continent, Caribbeans, and foundational black Americans share one coherent history just because we all get racialized as black under a European gaze. But my sharing history don't line no Ghana, no Nigeria, no South Africa. My lineage ain't some abstract African blob. My people's story is specific. The Middle Passage, slavery in the United States, Reconstruction, lynching campaigns, sharecropping, mass migration, fighting in U.S. wars, courtroom battles, constitutional amendments, legal fights for property rights, voting rights, and civil status. Our identity is deeply etched into Western institutions, especially American institutions, in a way that is fundamentally different from other black populations elsewhere. So when you collapse all of that into one vague Pan-African identity, you ain't honoring blackness. You are erasing concrete historical participancy, and you're replacing an ethnic identity with racial abstraction, and a racial abstraction that ain't ours. It's a European invention, a class system stamped on the bodies by colonialism and slavery. And that's why I say Pan-Africanism smuggles in white supremacy. It accepts the racial map that white supremacy created and then try to play a heroic game on the same board. It never questions the board though. It never questions why race is doing so much metaphysical heavy lifting in the first place. And my preference is simple. Ethnic identity over racial identity. Ethnic identity is more metaphysically refiable. It ties me to concrete history, concrete laws, concrete soil, concrete names, concrete sacrifices, and I'm not some floating racial category. I'm a descendant of a specific people in a specific place who built and reshaped a specific civilization. And that's why I say this plainly. As a human being, ain't no place I'd rather live than America. Not because America is perfect, not because America ain't got blood on his hands, but because my ancestors' blood is in the foundation. They fought and died on this land. They leveraged the law. They forced amendments. They carved out protections. There are provisions in the constitutional framework and in statutory law that exists because of what was done to and by black Americans here. That is not fiction. That is legal reality. When I say this is the best place in the world for black people, I am not romanticizing, I am recognizing that nowhere else on earth do you have this exact combination. A brutal history, yes, but also a set of rights, protections, and institutional levers that black people themselves forced into existence. We are not guests here, we are constitutive. And that's why I lean on people like Booker T. Washington. That's why I cite Thomas Sowell. That's why I appreciate thinkers like Edmund Burke on prepossession and James Madison on faction and private property. You can mock those names as white or respectable or conservative all you want, but it don't change the fact that you sitting here standing inside the very constitutional order those men help articulate, enjoying the political benefits their ideas produce, while sneering at everyone who takes their ideas serious. The irony is so suffocating, right? You sit inside Western constitutionalism using Western free speech norms and Western legal protection to call the overthrow or repudiation of the West, and you do it while calling someone like me a sellout for pointing to the very tools that gave you the space to complain in the first place. So let's expand that out into the broad philosophical frame. One of the most important transformations in the post-Enlightenment West is this. Social membership became detached from blood, tribe, and ritual. Civic culture emerged that allowed people to belong to a political community without sharing a religion, without sharing an ethnic lineage, without passing through some sacred rite tying their souls to one particular tribe. Membership became civic, not tribal. And in that kind of order, an immigrant can arrive from almost anywhere in the world, and the primary demand is not that they become a part of the bloodline, but that they adopt the civic culture and accept the duties tied to it. Pay taxes, obey the laws, respect the institutions, participate in the public square. That is the miracle of the modern West. At its best, it transforms political membership from an inherited, closed, sacred club into something that can, in principle, integrate strangers. And of course that ain't clean. Of course sometimes it comes with tension. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it fails. Integration ain't magic. It takes effort from both sides. The newcomer has to actually adapt to the surrounding culture. The host community has to make space without dissolving its entire identity. But the key point is this. Many people come to the West and Western countries, especially English-speaking ones, because of the advantages of this social order. The rule of law, property rights, relative predictability, the possibility of building multi-generational stability. They want all the benefits, but they do not always understand or accept the costs. They want the fruits of the tree while hacking at the roots. And now, the very virtue of Western civilization, this openness, this integrative potential, gets weaponized against it. In the name of multiculturalism, in the name of inclusion, we are told that the inherited customs, norms, and narratives that form this civic culture must be pushed to the margins. We are told that the majority must downplay or even despise its own historical identity so that every newcomer feels instantly at home without any serious obligation to adapt. The result is a culture that refuses to claim itself. You get a society where the people most bound to the land, to the institutions, to the sacrifices, are encouraged to treat their own inheritance as guilt, while new arrivals are told that the host has no moral right to expect effort from them. That is repudiating liberalism. That is using the liberal rights to erode pre-political loyalties that made liberal societies livable in the first place. Layer Pan-African ideology on top of that, and you get a perfect storm. On the one hand, Pan-Africanists are benefiting from Western civic culture, the right to organize, congregate, protest, publish, speak. On the other hand, they use that very freedom to argue that Western civilization has no rightful claim on them at all, as if their presence here is some cosmic mistake instead of the direct result of their ancestors' forced and then hard-won integration into this particular civilization. They talk as if Western civilization is a purely external oppressor, not a structure their own lineages help shape, confront, and reform, and partially redeem. They treat it like it's an invader, not a home that was brutally entered and slowly forced to make room. So when I say Pan-Africanism in the way that it is typically pushed online is white supremacy in disguise, that's what I mean. It takes the racial categories invented by white supremacy and treats them as metaphysical realities. It flattens diverse black peoples across time and space into one reactive identity organized against white people. It denies the specificity of foundational Black American history by dissolving us into an abstract Africa, while the actual institutions we fought to shape sit right under our feet. It uses the liberties afforded by Western civic culture to deny that Western civic culture has any legitimate claim on our loyalty, responsibility, or gratitude at all. Meanwhile, I'm over here saying something very simple. I am a descendant of Black Americans whose labor, blood, and genius are woven into the core of this country, and my identity is particular. It ain't a generic black blob that stretches from Lagos to London to Louisiana. It's rooted in specific laws that we forced into existence, specific fights that we won, specific institutions that we bled to enter and then transform. I am not interested in building my entire worldview around what white people did. I refuse to make the white man my metaphysical center. I refuse to keep white supremacy alive as a subconscious organizing principle of my politics. I am interested in conserving what my people built and what they extracted from this system. The space to build families, own property, pursue education, shape law, and claim full citizenship without apology. I am interested in defending a civic order that, however flawed, is still the best place on the world for someone of my lineage to build a life. If that makes me a CIA agent in the minds of people who are addicted to white-centered narratives, so be it. They can keep orbiting that white sun. I am not doing it.